Sometimes things just change overnight. It can go from terrible, absolutely horrific, to fantastic in just a few hours. Just a few days ago, this is what Texas looked like. Oh my gosh, look at that. A snowy disaster. Frigid conditions, power out everywhere. It was like a combination of New York and California all at once. And then, just a few hours later, beautiful. All the snow is melted, the power is on, and it's 74 freaking degrees. Now, I never want to leave the state of Texas ever again. It's kind of the same thing going on in reverse with Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo has been nursing this untouchable reputation since people in his state started keeling over from the coronavirus back in March. And despite my nearly insane ramblings on the topic, people continued to think he had done a good job. The truth, of course, is that Andrew Cuomo has overseen the single worst response to the coronavirus of any public official in the world. And finally, the tide seems to be turning against him. Let's look at the organization probably most responsible for the false hero narrative of America's dumbest gangster. The organization that also just happens to employ Andrew Cuomo's brother, CNN. Quoting their piece, gently titled, "Cuomo's National Star Threatened by Increased Scrutiny Over Handling of Nursing Home Deaths," they write, quote, "His data-heavy daily news briefings became appointment television for millions of Americans searching for a steady hand and a dose of empathy to counteract then-President Donald Trump's mixture of erratic, dangerous denialism." This, in large part, is how the media is trying to thread the needle on Cuomo. They're essentially saying, sure, Cuomo was a lot worse than we told you he was, but at the time, we were comparing him to Trump, who we hate even more. Every one of these pieces has their little disclaimers to justify their previous slobbering ass-kissing. The upheaval follows months of simmering anger among Cuomo critics who, while acknowledging the real public benefits of his early, hyper-engaged communication tactics, believe the governor sought to parlay his new popularity into a shield against legitimate questions over his actions. This is why Cuomo was popular during the worst of the pandemic, because he acted calm and certain about what was coming. And there's something to that. You don't want to go into a doctor with a fever and have them tell you, "Oh, geez, I knew this guy once who had a fever. Turned out he had lung cancer." Do you have a will yet? Have you done that? Make sure to take that step. Calmness can be comforting in a lot of serious situations. But let's say, you've been a 40-year, 3-pack-a-day smoker, and your scan, actually says you have lung cancer. Well, calmness and certainty that everything is going to be just fine is not helpful. That is what Andrew Cuomo was doing in the darkest days of the pandemic. Remember all the criticism of Donald Trump when he compared COVID to the flu? Well, Cuomo calmed the nerves and told New Yorkers with certainty the very same thing.
We have more people in this country dying from the flu than we have dying from coronavirus.
And he wanted to make sure that you knew it wasn't as serious as something crazy like Ebola.
This is not Ebola. This is not SARS. This is not some science fiction movie come to life. The hysteria here is way out of line with the actuality and the facts.
It's just hysteria, guys. It's true that COVID-19, of course, is not Ebola virus. In fact, COVID-19 would go on to kill more people in New York in just the first 2 weeks of April than Ebola has worldwide in all of human history. Cuomo's approval rating skyrocketed into the 70s during this crisis, and the fall has really only become recently as his scandals have been revealed, or I should probably say, since his scandals have started to be covered by the media. Latest Siena poll shows Cuomo gets positive grades for communicating with New Yorkers, 67 to 33% favorable, and providing accurate information, 61 to 36%. He gets mixed grades for the managing of the vaccine rollout. Mixed, geez. 40 people are fleeing the state to get vaccines from other states. He's about split there. And implementing the right plans for reopening New York. However, voters give Cuomo a negative grade, 39 to 55%, on making public all data about COVID deaths of nursing home patients, according to the new Siena poll of New York State voters. To show you how deeply affected the Cuomo praising mental disorder runs in New York, think about this for a second. The Cuomo administration has admitted, finally, that they haven't made the data about nursing homes public. Even they say they didn't do a good job on that. Yet still, 39% of New Yorkers approve of his handling of making data about nursing homes public. By the way, a new poll today shows Cuomo's approval rating has dropped from the 70s last year to about 57% now, down just 6 points in the last month alone. That is from Morning Consult, down to just 57%. While scientific consensus, of course, points to the fact that this is still 57% too high, at least it's going in the right direction. That's because media is finally catching up. They're plainly telling people that what is happening all of a sudden. For example, the New York Times wrote a story about this supposedly science-based governor and how he hasn't been listening to, scientists. But Cuomo had an answer for that. Quote, this week, one of Cuomo's top aides tried to rebut a New York Times story about his hostility to health experts by telling legislators that the governor speaks on a regular basis to prominent epidemiologist named Michael Osterholm, who she described as one of his chief advisors. On Thursday, Osterholm himself told PBS that although he has reviewed data for the state government, he has only spoken to Cuomo for one 5-minute conversation in his entire life. This passage is from Slate, not exactly known for its conservative street cred, and its title is delicious. Why do Democrats pretend Andrew Cuomo did a good job with COVID? Great freaking question. They note that the nursing home issue was not arbitrary. Quote, it does not look like the discrepancy could have resulted from innocent semantic misunderstandings. The AARP Public Policy Institute Nursing Homes COVID-19 dashboard noted to Slate that, quote, the CDC guidance for the data we use in our dashboard specifically states that resident deaths are supposed to be counted regardless of the place of death, which of course is what Cuomo was doing. He's fudging those numbers. While the managing editor of the COVID tracking project said its staff is not currently aware of any other U.S. state or territory that reports deaths in the way that New York did for most of the pandemic. And he's uniquely awful. That's why the cup exists. Andrew Cuomo is awful.com. Cuomo has been let off the hook for so much, for so long, that reading stuff like this must be shocking to everyone around him. Quote, to many voters, celebrating the idea of the competent blue state governor is more important than reckoning with the reality of a serially underachieving chief executive playing 3-card Monte with dead bodies. At this point, Andrew Cuomo could probably shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. It's not just Slate saying this. Slate, by the way, it's not just Slate. Newsweek has a piece entitled, It's Time, Impeach Andrew Cuomo. It's written by Ron Kim, a Democrat from New York, who told the truth about a Cuomo aide who admitted on a private call that they intentionally lied about the pandemic to avoid nasty Trump tweets. That prompted a call from Cuomo himself. Quote, on a private phone call, the governor berated me, threatened my career, and demanded that I issue a fabricated statement. He wanted me to deny what I heard on the call. Are you an honorable man? He yelled. Who do you think you are? This, too, was an attempt to rope me into his scheme. Those of us who have worked with Cuomo are familiar with his tendencies. There is a long pattern of abusive tactics that the governor deploys when the public gets too close to learning the truth. Cast the net far and wide, compromise as many unwitting accomplices, threaten retribution, then berate you for having the temerity to stand up. I call this Cuomo's predatory inclusion syndrome, and I won't be party to it. Again, this is from a Democrat, a New York Democrat. The New Yorker, who, by the way, also not freaking conservative, the New Yorker had more detail on the conversation. Quote, the governor was on the phone, fuming. I will destroy you, Cuomo screamed, according to notes Kim wrote down after the call, which he shared with me. The governor was so loud that Kim's wife and daughters grew upset, and Kim stepped out of the bathroom. "You haven't seen my wrath," Cuomo told him. "I will go out tomorrow and start telling the world how bad of this is like the worst threat ever. I will tell the world how bad of an assembly member you are, and you will be finished." Oh, don't let anyone say that about you. That's brutal. How about The Week? They are another left-wing publication. W-E-E-K, not W-E-A-K, by the way. They wrote a piece called "Resign Andrew Cuomo," and they have the perfect way to end this particular chapter of the Cuomo awakening. Quote, "In a sense, Cuomo's book has the correct title, American Crisis. It's just the crisis he's talking about is himself."